Welcome to Chapter 10.5, Grade 5 Math students. We're going to be talking about percents. We're going to learn to relate and compare percents, decimals, and fractions. Let's go. Percents are simply another way of writing the part of a whole. In this field, there are 100 tulips. 75 of them are red. There are 3 different ways that we can express that 75 out of 100 tulips are red. The first would be as a fraction, where we would write 75 over 100. You could simplify that if you wish, but for now we're just going to leave it at 75 over 100. The other way to write this relationship would be as a decimal. In decimal form, we would say we have 75 hundredths, or 0.75. Tulips being red. Finally, we can write a percent. A percent would be 75% of the tulips are red. The word percent means out of 100. So what we're saying here is that 75 out of 100, or percent, of the tulips are red. In practice problem number 1, please complete the table. If there are 100 beads and 38 of them are red, how would you express that as a fraction, as a decimal, and as a percent? Let's express part of a whole as a fraction and as a percent. The square here is divided into 100 equal parts. 25 of those parts are shaded. So, 25 out of 100 of those equal parts are shaded, or 25 hundredths of the large square is shaded. Now remember, percent means out of 100. So what percent of the whole is shaded? 25%, because 25 out of 100 are shaded. What percent of the whole is not shaded? 75%, because there are 75 parts that are not shaded, and we can find that by simply taking 100 minus 25. Let's do some practice problems with this idea. For problem 2, please count the parts out of 100 equal parts that are shaded. Then fill in the rest of the green boxes here. For problems 3 through 6, express as a percent, and for problems 7 through 10, express each fraction as a percent. There are 2 additional practice problems on the next screen, so press pause while you work these out and move on when you're ready. For problems 11 and 12, express each fraction as an equivalent fraction and then as a percent. Problem 11 walks you through converting 7/10ths to 71 hundredths, and then you can figure out the percent. Problem 12, follow the same rule that you see in problem 11. Our next idea is to learn to express decimals as percents. In our first example with the pink squares, we have 3 out of 100 squares filled in. Conveniently, our decimal, hundredths, is already explained to us as being out of 100, because 3 hundredths, or 3 hundredths, already relates our quantity, 3, to its relationship with 100. So 3 hundredths, or 3 hundredths, is 3%. Now let's look at our second box here. I've just put a red arrow to it. There are 45 squares filled in, or 45 hundredths, 45 out of 100. So that decimal will be expressed as a percent, as 45%. Again, these are pretty straightforward because we're already comparing apples to apples. We're talking about a number out of 100 and comparing it to another number that's measured by its relationship to 100. So 45 hundredths, and 45%. They're all different ways of saying the same thing. Finally, let's look at this problem. 7/10ths. 7/10ths is equal to 71 hundredths. And thus we'll express that as a percent as 70%. Now try these problems on your own. For each, express the decimal as a percent. Complete both steps. First, convert the decimal to a fraction out of 100, and then express it as the percent. Press pause while you work. I'll be back with a new idea when you're finished. Let's continue learning how to move between these different ways to express our relationships. And these problems will express percents as fractions. So, in our first example with the orange squares, we have 8 out of 100. We could also write that as 8%. If we simplify our fraction, 8 out of 100, each is divisible by 4, which will give us a new fraction that is 2 out of 25. So 8% expressed as a fraction in simplest form is 2/25. Let's take a look at the example with the purple boxes. We have 65 out of 100 of our squares filled in, or 65%. Writing that as a fraction, we have 65 out of 100. Our second box here shows what happens when we divide both numerator and denominator by greatest common factor, which is 5, which gives us a new equivalent fraction of 13 out of 20. So 65% expressed as a fraction is 13/20. Now try some of these yourself. Express each percent as a fraction in its simplest form. Don't forget to reduce those fractions so that you have it in simplest form rather than leaving them over 100. Press pause while you work. We have one final idea for this chapter when you come back. And here is the grand finale for chapter 10.1. We're going to learn to express percents as decimals. See, we just keep moving back and forth between these different ways to express the relationships between numbers. Okay, let's look at the box of yellow cubes here. We have 48%, or 48 out of 100. 48 out of 100 can also be written as 48 hundredths, or 0.48. Done. That's how easy it is to convert from a percent to a decimal. They're both out of 100, so the conversion is really simple. Let's go to the orange cubes here. We have 79%, or 79 out of 100, or 79 hundredths. 79% expressed as a decimal is 79 hundredths. And here are your last 4 practice problems. Please express each percent as a decimal. And that wraps up chapter 10.1 for us. I will see you tomorrow to do more practice with percents. See you then.